Hi, Chris DeLeon here, founder of HomeTeamGameDev.com, and today's video is going to be pretty special. It's our advanced Unity trainer, Jonas, who is lead engineer on Subnautica. And normally in Home Team, we're not really about classes, right? Most of what we do in Home Team is about building projects together, learning because you ran into a question and scheduling a meeting with me or one of our specialists to get answers about how to learn the specific real problem you're working on. But Jonas, as an advanced developer, has seen so many patterns in the kind of mistakes that newer developers make that he wanted to prepare a general workshop. And this is something he's actually been teaching locally over in Taiwan. He knows that part of what we do in Home Team is we document, we get people together live online, and he knew we could help broadcast this message. So this is something where he's got his code up on GitHub. You'll see a link in the description or at the first part of this video, probably even right here, for where you can go check out his write-up about it, download the project code, and then hear just the same experience our Home Team members had. We had a small fraction of members present, maybe about a dozen or so of our people, and that's probably because he wanted something a little more interactive. And you'll see and hear throughout this that, you can go to that page, you can check it out, you can read through those, but in the conversation that we have, we raise some other questions, we try some other things out. He asks some questions people field, and I think you'll just see it's an interesting dynamic. I think it's a lot of the learning comes from kind of how we adapt to changing scenarios, how we deal with special cases, and like he points out, like a lot of programming is these quirks. Like that is what game development consists of. So thank you, Jonas, so much for taking time to do this. For anybody interested in working more with Jonas through Home Team, you can apply at HomeTeamGameDev.com. Most of the year, we just build games together for practice, but people who are currently leading Unity project teams can meet with him currently up to once a quarter, get some questions about feedback about your code, your questions, how he might architect something a little bit differently if he was doing it for a console. And to me, a large part of learning is making mistakes, running into problems, recovering from them when you have a safe environment to do that, like Home Team. But this is something where the system he's talking about, it's a really interestingly general idea you can use for many different parts of programming. Here we show it for a player controller, but like he talks about, could be used for using for a UI system, could be used for an AI system. Lots of different places this could be used. And one of the cool things I think about this is how, even though he's mainly a programmer and makes no, disclaimers around that, here's an example where he's really utilizing a system within Unity that's been a staple of this platform for a while that wasn't fundamentally built or intended for programmers in a way that helps improve the work he does in engineering. So I think it's a really cool lens to look at it from, a neat way to make more use, get more power out of our tools. Thank you again, Jonas. And here I'll just hand off. And you'll see I've done some light editing. There's some times where we have some various little technical snags, or we have minor interruptions or adapting, or, the kind of questions about like, hey, is my screen coming through? Can you hear this? Can you see this? I've tried to edit out a good number of those, especially see those early on. We're kind of first just getting our wheels rolling. So if you see some little jumps, that's what that's about. Oh, actually, one other thing I definitely want to mention. We've had a whole bunch of people over the years who, when they finally figure out what Home Team is and how it works, we're like, oh my gosh, if I'd understand that sooner, I would have totally applied already. Shoot. That time difference. So what I've done is I've put together an FAQ. It's a totally new section at HomeTeamGameDev.com, FAQ section. Just go to HomeTeamGameDev.com, click on the FAQ on the side, and you'll see an expansive amount of information we've laid out, answering a ton of common questions, misconceptions people have about what we are, how we operate, why it's built the way that it is, how it gets people such good results, regardless of their background, whether they've been making games alone for 7 years, whether they've been doing game jams, whether they've done nothing before. The difference that we make in people's lives is tremendous, and we explain why and how we do that inside our FAQ at HomeTeamGameDev.com. So make sure to check that out if you've got questions about how Home Team works. All right, now over to Jonas. Should they have Unity open? Is this something more so they kind of watch and follow along and ask questions about? What works best for your...
Yes, you can absolutely have Unity open, but if you don't have two monitors, I think it's better to just like full screen it, because I'm going to share my Unity and it's like this tiny, right? So I will be using some scripts that I already wrote before, so it's not like you can just like start it and it works on your end. It's also on GitHub, but like downloading that right now would probably also not work.
Well, actually, so even that's useful for people to know that afterwards we'll post the link to that in our Slacks and stuff. And of course, when this becomes a video on YouTube, then underneath that video, people can easily check that out after, with this is the explanation. So that means they don't have to as furiously take notes or try to screen grab everything you type, because they'll have that. Right. Excellent. And speaking of which, I do want to add as a reminder to folks that this video is very likely to end up on YouTube publicly, including outside of our group.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for having me. As you said already, my name is Jonas. I work on this game, Subnautica here. I was the lead engineer for many years. Now we're working on a sequel, which is supposed to come out in like next year, but I'm not working on that. I'm working on like console ports and low-level things. And speaking of low-level things, I spend a lot of time looking at code reviewing, thinking about code. And today I would like to share something with you, which is part of my game development workshop I run here in Taipei, which is the main idea is how to avoid spaghetti code. Because when I do code reviews, I often come across something that looks like this. And by the way, I call this a workshop because it's better if you like shout and raise your hand or like interrupt me and we make it a little bit more interactive than just like me blah blahing you. So whenever you find code like this, it's a very good indication that there's something going on which you can simplify massively. It's basically a long list of if statements that check certain conditions in if other certain conditions are being met, right? And it's always hard to debug, and it's like when the game designer asks you to like put just one more special case in there, you just end up quitting your job and crying. And so what we're gonna do instead is we're gonna put the bulk of the work into a state machine, which kind of looks like this. And so instead of if statements, we're gonna have states, and then depending on which state we're in, something different is gonna happen. And the example I'm going to use is we're going to write a game controller, like player controller. This is my little project here. Okay, so the idea is we have a simple platformer game, right? We can move around, we can jump, and we want to implement all the fancy things you would expect in a platformer. Like you want to have a double jump, you want to have coyote time, and you want to be able to jump small and big depending on how long you press the button. Those kind of things. I'm going to explain them a little bit more in detail. And so the basic idea, I'm sure most of you have written a player controller before. Player controllers tend to be a big mess as soon as you go beyond the very, very basics of like, okay, left, right, and jump. And then eventually they just become special cases. The basic idea that we're going to do is repurpose Unity's animation system to implement a state machine. We're not going to use any like plugin or custom things. We're just going to pretend an animator is a state machine because it is. And the shape of the solution is going to be like this. So we have our player here with a jump controller. It has an animator, right? And here's our state machine. Our first state machine is going to look like this. I'm going to explain this in a second. And then there are two scripts on it. One is to feed the parameters into the state machine, and one is to react on what comes out of the state machine. And I'm going to show you the scripts later, but for now, you're just going to have to believe me that they are very, very simple, and they do exactly one thing, feeding stuff in or getting stuff out and reacting to it, right? So what are we going to feed in? Well, if you make a platforming game, you probably need to know whether you are on a platform, whether you are standing on ground, right? This is the first parameter over here, and it's currently true, right? And if I like, let me walk off the ledge here. Okay, I'm falling into infinity. It's false now. Help. Reset. Okay, good. And then we have the jump button, which is exactly true for as long as I hold the jump button, which is space in my case, right? Like,
yeah. If I can ask you a quick question, so it's from I4's, and he's wondering kind of as maybe even a higher level, choosing to use the animator as a state machine as opposed to other ways to do a state machine without an animator, for example. Is it largely about making it easier for the coder, like just from even from a advantages or rationale perspective? What's our main advantage? But this is super neat to me because I'm used to kind of avoiding the animator because like I'm a programmer, I'll just be in my code.
Yeah.
And this is pretty cool. I can leverage the system, but just curious as to.
This is an excellent question. Thank you. That really excellent question. So if all you have is a hammer, every problem tends to look like a nail, right? So if you're a programmer, you just want to do everything in code, and the sad truth is you can, because like computers, right? But it's not gonna be efficient. There are often other tools that are way better suited than code. This is one of those cases. One of the reasons why this is way better suited than code is it's faster to iterate on, which we will see that later. It's easier to swap in and out. You can do like hot loading while in play mode. That doesn't really work in Unity, like, for being honest, with code. And then the main, oh, two more things. It allows visual debugging. Right now, I can see that I am in the on ground state, right? And like if I like walk off here, I can see that I am now in the falling state. I don't have to connect a debugger. I don't have to like put printf statements in my code. I can just like see what is going on, and if my state machine is doing something weird, I can just like literally look at it in this window. So that is all very handy. But then the thing that to me is the most interesting as a programmer is that it forces me to think about the problem in three parts. It forces me to think about the problem in the part where I put input into the state machine itself, which cannot be code, and then the output of the state machine, which again is going to be code, right? Because if I were allowed to do all these three things in code, I would probably not be very diligent at keeping the separation very straight, right? And then if you don't do that, if you have more dependencies, then you lose a lot of the benefits that I just listed. Does that make sense?
Certainly makes sense to me. I think so. Yeah. Well covered. And we'll probably have other clarification questions as we go too. But thank you.
Yeah, that was a great question, and I think I answered that in the on GitHub, where I have like, it should be somewhere in here. why exactly we're going to use a visual programming tool, right? Okay, so where was I? Feeding values into the state machine. On ground is true when I'm on the ground. Jump button is true as long as I hold the jump button, and that's it. And so our first state machine, the simplest thing that we basically can come up with that is a player controller with a jump. Oh, by the way, left and right is not in the state machine. It's just for the jumping. It has three states, right? We're either on the ground, falling down, or we're just starting a jump. So if I'm on the ground and now I'm no longer on the ground, this is the condition here, then I'm falling. If I'm falling and I'm no longer falling because I'm now on the ground, I go back to here. That's how these two connections work. Nothing to do with jumping, just like basic state things. And very important when you abuse an animator as a state machine is you always have to set the transition duration to 0 and get rid of exit time. Otherwise, weird things happen. But it's visual debugging, so you will see when weird things happen. Okay, so this covers the basic state. On the ground, we are allowed to jump. When we're falling, we're not allowed to jump. We're like just falling, right? You can't jump from air. So when we're on the ground and we press the jump button is true, we're going to start a jump, and then immediately, this one has an exit time and no condition, we're going to go into falling, because technically, even when we're still rising, physics is active and we're falling, right? And to actually react on this state, we're going to put a script on this. So I'm not sure if you've ever done this, but in Unity state machines, you can actually attach scripts behaviors to states. They have to be special state machine behaviors, not mono behaviors. and they essentially, instead of getting messages like start, on destroy, on trigger enter, or something like that, they only get 2 messages, which are on enter and on exit. So I have a script here, which I'm going to show you later, and it has exactly 2 things, on enter and on exit. I attach it to here, right? And then I say, okay, on enter, do something. In this case, why can I not remove it? That's funny.
We're seeing the remove. Is it not letting you, I guess?
No, it's.
Is it because you're in play? Maybe.
I guess so.
Maybe it doesn't
yeah.
like it dynamically being. Yeah.
That's funny. It lets me add stuff in play mode, but not remove. Okay, I didn't know. Okay, so on enter, we're gonna just send a message using Unity send message to ourselves, to the player game object, and then we have a handler here that receives the message, and when the start jump message comes in, it's just gonna like physically bounce our player up, and that's it, right? And so I've already kind of demonstrated it. This works. I can press the jump, and we can fall. And let me try to now. You have to watch the jump button. I'm going to press the jump button while I fall down from this to here, and you will notice that it's not jumping here. It's only jumping once I hit the ground, because as long as I'm in the falling state, there's simply no transition that listens to the jump button, right? That's the main idea. So far, any questions? What you're seeing?
One I have, and it's one you might get to later, because, like I said, part of what's interesting about this is the way it can be used for the usual state muckiness that is a platformer. But obviously, the bunch of the subtlety in platform jumping has to do with, like, if I release the button midair, then it has interesting behaviors where it cuts off my height jump, and it's not just like a rocket single instant impulse from the ground. And that's to where I have a hard time picturing the state transitions for, like, it's like the middle of the air and I'm letting go of a button that I was holding. I'm sure it can be done. And if that's something that would either come up later or be kind of beyond the scope of what we can fit now, either is understandable. But that's the first thing I'm wondering about. Like, I want to get that Mario jump.
That's almost a perfect transition to the next state machine I'm going to show you. It's in 2 steps. The first, so please bear with me. I will fix that problem, because like you said, right now if I just press the jump button very briefly, like I just like tap it, you can almost not see the true state going on here. It still does a full jump, right? That's terrible. We don't want that. But before I get to the part where we can actually cancel the jump, there's one other thing that I want to fix. Let me just hold down the jump button here for a second. I'm just holding it down, right? I'm not like releasing it. I'm not doing anything. I'm just holding it down. This is probably not the behavior we want out of a platformer. That is not what you expect. It would be really weird to play. There might be gameplay in here that is actually fun with this, but Mario and all the other standard platformers don't work like that. So let's fix this first, right? What's going on here? What's going on is that, okay, I'm jumping, I'm falling, and then I hit the ground. On ground is true, right? And so I'm in this state, but immediately when I'm in this state, I go into a new start jump because the jump button is true, right? And at no point in the state machine, it was requiring me that the jump button was false before it starts to jump. So if I can just like hold the jump button down, and it keeps jumping forever as soon as it hits the ground. What are we gonna do about that? Any ideas? This is a workshop.
I'm less interested in my guesses than somebody else's. If anybody else has guesses, then obviously, again, feel free to type in the chat or unmute yourselves if you're comfortable with that. Check if jump is false first. Guesses, I force.
Yeah, how do I do that in a state machine? I don't have code.
Code was going to be my first answer.
Ah.
Brian's wondering about stopping it from repeating. Rockley says require false before starting jump. So the conceptually know what we want to do. As to how we do it in the state machines, maybe if exit after pressed, some sort of trap state, maybe.
So there are multiple ways to do this, right? One way would be to not put in the values like I'm putting them in, where right now it's just like it's true when I'm holding it and it's false when I'm not holding it. You could use, for example, triggers instead of booleans, and you can just send a trigger when you start pressing it and a trigger when you start releasing it, all right, on button down, on button up. And then this logic is very different. And then you can say, okay, on button down, you start a jump. Or or you can send like an integer instead that like tells you, are you holding it, are you just pressing it in this frame, like what's going on. And then this condition becomes, okay, only when you just like press it down. But these are all like complicated things. We're going to keep it very, very simple. What I'm going to suggest is we're going to create a new state, put it here, in here, and we're going to call this, okay, we are on ground.
I have a question, since you're doing it live, and it seems like something you're pretty confident what you're doing. It's while it's running. Because this is part of an animator system, is this safe to do and we won't lose the changes made here when you unplay, in the way that we couldn't make changes in the scene without losing them?
I have no idea, but I think so, because it is an asset, right?
Yeah, like a material, right?
Yeah, it's like a material. It's physically in here as its data jump controller. So I am assuming that I'm actually modifying the real jump controller and not just like some live copy of it that's gonna get thrown away. But we will find out. So I'm gonna introduce a new state, which is on ground, but I'm still holding the jump button. And instead of going directly from falling to that, I'm gonna make it look like this, right? And so the idea is, okay, I was falling, and now I'm no longer falling because on ground is true. So now I'm on the ground, right? But I'm still holding jump. And if I'm on the ground and still holding jump, I'm not allowed to start a new jump. So most importantly, there's no transition from here to here. Instead, I will require that if I'm on the ground still holding jump, I have to release the jump button first, which is exactly what you were suggesting, like checking that it's false, right? Okay, so jump button is false. So now I know that if I'm in the on ground state and I came from here, the jump button is false. That's kind of what we want. Let me check that all my transitions are looking right. Looks kind of good. Okay, let's check. Here's up my jump, falling. I'm still holding the jump button, still true, right? On ground. As soon as I release it, I'm in the regular on ground state and I can start a new jump. Seems to work fairly well. And oh, here's the other thing. Okay, I press it very shortly. I release it, right? As you can see, the state machine like almost immediately goes back to the on ground state. You hardly can see that it is for one frame in this state, because this condition, this access condition here, is true right away, right? Because I already released the jump button ages ago. So it's fine that we don't have this transition anymore, which you could have with like two conditions. Okay, you're on the ground and the jump button is not pressed, because it's simply just gonna like very quickly run through this state and then immediately go to this state.
Just got a question. I had a guess, but you'll probably know better than I do. Can the same thing also be used to like attach audio into these transitions and stuff? If
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely, you can. So with these things here, this is a very generic script that just sends a message to my game object, and then you can write any script that receives a message, right? Maybe I should show that now to make it a little bit more clear. And you could play a sound or particle effect, or I'm triggering physics. You could do whatever you want, literally whatever you want. In fact, one of my animator colleagues asked me specifically for this thing because he wants to be able to do more by himself without having to bug coders, right? And so they are dealing with state machines all the time. They know how to attach scripts to game objects. If he had this thing and there was a generic script that listens for a message and then plays a sound, he can hook up everything himself without ever having to touch code, which is nice. Okay, let's see some code, because I'm getting code questions.
Although before, I'm actually still just very curious. If you unplay, will we keep our new on ground still holding jump state? Because if so, that's neat, and if not, good to know. Hey, look at that! Able to work on it without losing your changes live. Pretty rad.
We still have it. Amazing. Okay, you just ruined my project. I have to undo everything. No, I'm kidding. This is good. I actually had another jump controller 2 prepared that looks exactly like this, right? But doing it live is also nice. Maybe we'll just do it live. Okay, code. I hope you're all comfortable reading code. We have 3 things that are interesting to talk about. This is the script that I can attach to states. Here, send message state, right? I can add a behavior, and it allows me to attach only the behaviors that are derived from state machine behavior as opposed to mono behavior. It has exactly 2 fields, on enter, on exit, which are strings, and it's gonna on state enter, that's like a Unity thing. It's just gonna send a message to the very same object, and the message is gonna be whatever we define. And because we probably want to have an error if nobody's listening for that, we do require a receiver. That's the entire script. It's totally generic. You don't even have to write this. Just grab that off my repository, use it. Then I was saying to have a state machine, we have 3 parts: the state machine itself, and then we have to put values in and get values out. Let's see how we get values in. I'm not going to go through all of this, but the main idea is here in update, we are setting bools for the animator. We're setting the on ground bool if we're on ground, and we're setting the jump button bool if the jump button is being held down. And figuring out whether we're on ground or not, we're just going to do some raycasting stuff in fixed update. It's a little bit more involved, but essentially just think we're casting a ray down at our feet, and if it touches anything very close to our feet, that's when we are on the ground. So and that's it. There are only the main part of the function is this update where it just sets these 2 bools, right? And so okay, we now have a way to put stuff into the state machine. We now have a way to react when we enter or exit a state. Now we need to have the third part, which is when we receive one of these messages, which in my case is when I want to start a jump. So the message I was sending was called start jump with like exactly this capitalization. And so this function in this behavior is just going to get called magically by Unity, right? And all this does is setting the start jump bool internally to true, and then in fixed update I do the real work because my jumps are physical, and so everything physical has to go in fixed update, and you're not allowed to do it just here, right? And the first thing it does is reset this, and you don't really have to worry about this. All it does is this is the player. It puts an impulse directly onto the player's feet for 1 frame, and then it just jumps off, right? And then the rest is gravity. Those are my jump physics in this game. There are many different platformers. They have all kinds of jump physics. These are not the only possible jump physics. Most of them are fake in interesting and weird ways just because it feels better. But in my game, the jump controller is literally just like 1 impulse and then it takes off. That's it. Okay. If you want anything more fancy, that would be in the code, not in the state machine.
And as a quick question, because I think it's a keyword that I know is from general C#, but one I don't see as often used in Unity. I'm curious if it's importance versus like nice to have. I think it was a sealed class, which, if I'm not mistaken, just like blocks inheritance of it. I don't know if it's it's a formality. It's good practice. I don't know if it's in some way necessary for what we're doing here about how these things talk to each other.
Right. No, it's not necessary. It's a thing I like to do. Two things that I do that are not like in a standard monitoring behavior is the sealed, and I'm using serialized field private instead of public. The sealed basically just says that nobody can derive from this, which is useful if you have magic functions. Because if you have magic functions, they are not like protected or override virtual abstract, any of these things. And so the derived class could, by accident, put a function in there that happens to have the same name, and then things go really weird, right?
Nothing else can intercept your send message calls, right?
Yeah,
That's what. Oh yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, that's exactly what it is. So I just don't want to think about all the problems that come with inheritance in the Unity world. Like in a sane world where you know exactly how messages are going to be called, not reflection, right? But like just if they're public, they can be called. If they're private, they cannot be called. That's fine. You don't really need the sealed class, sealed attributes often. But in Unity, anything can call anything all the time by simply sending a message with the right name, and that's a little scary. So that's why I like to put sealed on stuff, just to like show intent to other programmers. I'm working with a team of like 6 programmers, that they are not supposed to just like inherit from my class because they are doing something that looks like similar but not quite, right? And then they don't really think about the subtleties of what's going on inside my class, or how this class fits into the whole Unity ecosystem. That's why um, I'm doing the sealed thing.
And I guess, and just while you're here, I know we should, but serialized field privates, I'm assuming that's essentially comparable to just containing but exposing.
Right. So serialized field means it shows up in the inspector, just like a private, just like a public field, right? If you do it on a mono behavior, it's just like regular shows up in the inspector. You can set values. It saves to the prefab and all that kind of stuff, which is exactly what you want. But it's still private, meaning that if any other code tries to access it, they cannot. And that is good, because what I really, really want is private read only. I don't want, I want this to be a thing that is only configured once in the inspector, and then once it is in and I hit play mode, I don't want any changes to it. I don't want anyone nulling it. I don't want anyone replacing it. I don't want any of these things. Unfortunately, that's not a thing in Unity. You cannot make it private read only. So the closest we can get to preventing other people from messing with our stuff is to make it private, and then in order to still be able to configure it in the Unity inspector, we have to put the serialized field attribute on.
Right on. And then just one last note on this, because of the sealed was obviously the kind of previous thought. Cassie's wondering, does that prevent Animator override controllers?
No, those are something else. I'm not super familiar with all the other stuff that you can do with an animator, but this sealed has nothing to do with overriding other things. It only has something to do with these scripts that I can attach to states in the state machine. I think the override controller is like, oh god, it's like something, a property of the animator, and then you can like do fancy things here. I'm not 100% certain on this, but
I think there's some meta reassurance that even people who are experts in these things are like, there's parts of it that we use, and there's parts of it where it's like, that's why there's a team of us.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I mostly don't do gameplay. So when it comes to like scripting mono behaviors and all that, I'm a noob. But if you ask me about like Unity engine kind of stuff, that's more where I happen to have some experience, right? That's totally fine. Let's move on. So we have the ability to move around. We have the ability to jump, and if we hold the jump button, we don't bounce for forever. Chris' question was, what do we do to cancel the jump, right? To like not jump all the way up if we only press it a little bit. I'm going to show you the code first. I already have prepared a stop jump function, which we're going to magically call from the state machine. And what it does is down here, it's essentially going to cancel the up velocity. It's like you're hitting an invisible ceiling with your head, and then from in just one frame, right? You just hit it, and you stop your upwards velocity, and from then on, gravity kicks in, and just you just fall down. So in terms of physics, that's all we're going to do. Again, different platformers use different kinds of mechanics to cancel jump. This is what we're going to use. We'll just hit an invisible ceiling that comes in as soon as you release that jump button. And if you're already falling, the invisible ceiling still comes in, but you're falling, right? So you're not hitting it. That is actually how jump works in Mega Man. Fun fact. Let me quickly cheat and see how I'm. Oh yes, right. This is how I implement it. So we go back to our jump controller. Any ideas how we implement jump canceling?
I have guesses, but once again, gonna see if anybody else in the group. Go to fall on release button is Rock's proposal.
Release button where? Like where in these things am I is releasing the jump button interesting?
From start jump. Between
Okay.
start jump and falling to make a check for stop.
Okay, so something like this, right? Here, make another transition. Oh, here it shows them here. There's one and there's one. Okay, so this was my original one with just exit time immediately transitioning over, and then you're suggesting we put another one without an exit time, and then okay, jump button falls, right? We go to falling. I mean, I can do that, but we were already going immediately to falling. We were not staying in the start jump state, so it was we would only be in here for one frame anyway. So assuming I remove the original one and I only go over to falling when I release the jump button, you still somehow have to send the message to my controller, right? How would you do that? Where would you do that?
Brian Nielsen, something between start jump and falling that triggers stop jump?
That sounds pretty good to me, yeah. Let's see how that would look like. So I'm just gonna move this up a little bit. So maybe we'll, oh God. Oh God, no. I'm breaking everything. Did I introduce a new transition? No. Okay, so let's say, go here, go like stop jump. So I introduce a new, like, kind of like, it looked like this, right? It's in between here, but I'll make a little bit more space. Okay, you were peeking at the slide. That's fine. I had to peek too. The nice thing about this is you can experiment while it's in play mode, right? And you can like see whether it's actually working or not. In fact, let's just play. Let's just do that. Okay, so probably something like this where I guess you cannot modify these. That sucks. Okay, never mind. Release the jump button. No exit time. Right? Okay. Jump here, go into start jump, and then no more jump. Go out of start jump, go into stop jump. Stop jump, immediately going over to falling because we want gravity to just take over. Start. Let's see if that does anything. Wait, jump control. Here we go. Okay, on ground, start jump. Oh, why is there an exit time on this one? That is not 0. Has exit time 0. Fixed duration 0. List empty. So what I'm expecting is that this state can only be active for a single frame and it would immediately exit. What I just saw was that it stays in this state for like an entire second before it goes over. See this? I want it to be like boop, boop, and instead it goes like meow, and then over to this. I don't like it.
Brian's wondering, are we calling stop jump from anywhere yet?
We're not calling it yet.
Not yet.
We'll do that. But I really have to figure out what's going on here.
Wait, between those two, one of them, when you clicked on one of those arrows on either side of stop jump,
Yeah.
one looked like it had a value grayed out. That one has exit time grayed out. If you click on the other arrow,
right. That is intentional.
That's expected. Okay.
I should actually. Wait, that's the only one that has an exit time. Okay, all these arrows here have a condition. Here, condition jump button true, condition jump button false, condition on ground false, condition jump button false, condition on ground true, right? The only one that doesn't have a condition is this one, because I want to immediately go over to falling. And that requires this box here to say, okay, it has an exit time and the exit time is 0, which means immediately. And that should work, but it doesn't. Let me try to do this again. At least that if it doesn't work, if I can't make it work, I will cheat and have a look at my
totally fine
prepared solution.
It's like when you pull the thing out of the oven.
Yeah, no, it's not working. I have no idea. Let's find out what I'm doing wrong. Oh, that's right. 0. Unity.
Well, now we can't forget because we saw it.
So 0 is no good. 0 is like this being disabled. So you have to use some value that is very, very close to 0, but not 0. That's a bug. But it's not my bug. We're gonna work around it. We're gonna not shout at Unity. We're gonna hope that they will fix it eventually. But we'll make do. All right? Very, very small time, essentially 0. See it again. Oh, I have to select this. Aha, very good. You can see for sometimes you can see it, but you almost cannot see it, that it is in this frame, in this stop jump state for like 1 frame before it immediately goes out. Okay, so, and if I hold the jump button, it just keeps being in the start jump state. It doesn't go over to stop jump. So now we have a way to figure out when was the jump button released. Now we have to actually react on it, right? Someone already said, are we sending it? No, we're sending it. No, we don't. So let's send it. Put a send message state on here. On enter, sending stop jump. It worked. That's all. It's pretty good, right? Hold the jump button. Can jump. Short jump. Long jump. Cool. Any problems?
So I think
any problems?
I think my next question, which may, and I genuinely don't know, leading to what you're going with this anyway, is that I'm vaguely remembering last time we had actually. I'm first interrupted with Rock had that question. Who's not me. Do you still need the on ground still holding, or is that now obsoleted by this new added state?
That's a good question. I guess right now I don't need it because you really cannot leave the start jump without releasing, right? So, and the only way to no, I think I still need it. Okay, look at this. If I run off the platform without jumping and in the air, I start pressing the jump button, and when I touch the ground, I will still hold the jump button, right? It would jump immediately if we didn't have the state. Let's see what I mean. So you have to watch really closely because it's gonna be a 1 second thing. I'm gonna walk off. I'm gonna land here, and in the air, like in midair here, I'm gonna start holding the jump button. Here you see I still need this state because otherwise, as soon as I would land, it would bounce right off. Right? But that was a very good question, and of course we could have just tried it. We could literally have just like make a transition over here and be like, oh, okay, let's remove this and see if it works, right? And if QA is good, then we would have found no, you can like do this, and then it jumps off.
Cassidy had a question: is skipping the stop jump in the controller just due to the limited time it's in that state?
Yeah, it's not actually skipping it. It is active for a single frame, right? If I were to make this time here a little bit longer, then you would actually be able to see it for a little bit longer.
Speaking of frame, are these all in physics frames, i.e., about 20 FPS, and not update frames closer to 30 to 60, right?
These are all in update, not in fixed update.
Ah, okay.
Animators run in just regular time, in game time. They don't run in physics time. And technically, we're using an animator here, right? And that is also the reason why I'm doing this weird hack here, where I'm instead of like, this is the code that I want to do, I'm not putting it in here in start jump directly. I'm like deferring it, right? I'm like setting the bool, and then in the next fixed update, I'm actually doing the jump code because this is physics code. And if I were to do it right here, it's technically not correct. Technically, you shouldn't have physics code outside of fixed update. That's exactly what this is, and an animator state machine is running in late update, I think, or in update, in one of those two. But it's running in however fast your game is running, not in physics.
Right on. So my next question was, and again, I don't know if this is where you're going with this anyway, because that feels kind of inevitable in this sort of thing. My thinking back to the previous time we just put state machines in a platformer, and granted we were in JavaScript, there was obviously kind of a bit of a rat's nest in a way that we weren't sure of how to get around of, okay, we've got all these kind of like multiple axes of states. Of not only is there jumping and crouching, there's also crouching side to side, there's jumping diagonally, and it wasn't clear, like, should that be two separate state machines that simultaneously coexist? Sounds like a problem. Or does it mean you multiply times 3 all of your states? And is there no easy way around that? Because like animation's gotta animate kind of thing.
You have successfully identified the primary problem with state machines, which is you can't really reuse states. The only way to do something similar to what you had before, but a little bit different, is basically to copy everything and then like hook it up, right? And then your state machine just has like two very similar looking state machines inside. Unless the problem is truly separable, where like I have one state machine for going left and right and one state machine for jumping, and there's no connection between the two whatsoever, then I can just literally make two animator controllers and have here two animator, like two game objects with animators on them, right? And then it's all very separate. But probably in general, you will end up duplicating. Probably gonna happen. Yes.
Which was reassuring to know. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. That might just be how it looks when solved in this particular tool set. I4 is wondering, is this comparable to a finite state machine kind of thing?
It is a finite state machine. Yes, that's exactly what this is. This is a deterministic finite state machine. One thing about the reuse, you can create sub-state machines. So if you have, if let's say, I don't know, the start jump state was doing something complicated where it's really like 3 steps, you could have a sub-state machine, and then it goes like into the sub-state machine, does the 3 steps, and comes back out. So you might be able to do what Chris was saying earlier, where you have like two things that are looking very, very similar. You put them in sub-state machines, and then you like hook them up a little bit different. There's a lot of goodness in the Unity animation controller system. I encourage you to keep it stupid simple, because if you do that, it will be easier to maintain and easier to debug. And if that means duplicating a few states, probably not the end of the world. If it gets unwieldy and you're, I don't know, 200 states, okay, time to reevaluate whether this is the right tool for the job, right? That's what I was saying earlier. This is not a tool for everything, but it tends to be a very good tool for avoiding spaghetti code that is very like if this then that, and right, has a lot of if conditions.
Well, so speaking of which, I mean, lots of other things that we tend to throw state machines at. I'm curious, is something like this also how you do things like hook up menus in relation to each other, which is often common as a state machine problem? Are you using an animator to drive that kind of connectivity?
Chris, you're the best. How are you doing this? If you go to this page where I say, okay, spaghetti code avoided, right? Everything is a state machine. I list 3 examples of typical spaghetti code or typical problems that can be solved with state machines. Input handling is what we're doing right now. AI is the other classic example. AI logic, right? Bot behavior, state machines. If you don't want to go as crazy as behavior trees, and then game controllers or like UI controllers, you can call them. We have like layers of UI, and depending on like which window is open right now, the back button does a different thing, right? It's always like the back button, but or like left, right, up, down, and menu navigation is typically very, very messy. And yes, you can absolutely do this better, often better with a state machine, and you can do that the state machine in an animator controller.
And I guess one of the other questions that comes up just from, and you've obviously been on Unity for a number of years too. One of the things that from like the programming side of occasionally I'll get squeamish about the stuff that's not in code, if only because it seems so volatile sometimes of like, this feature wasn't there when I started using Unity. Will it be there next year? Do I make things that are contingent upon this very specific piece of like they bought Pro Builder or something? But this seems like as stable / gonna stick around as any other piece of this framework, right? I mean, this is pretty core.
Yeah, I started with Unity 4, which was like 6 years ago or something like that. And I think the Animator controller, as we see it here, was already in there and was pretty much the same. So this is probably very stable. But that was another excellent question, because I'm not sure if you heard that, but Unity just acquired something called Bolt, which is
kind of their version
like
of Blueprints or Kismet. Yeah.
And this looks very similar to what we're doing right now, right? These you can absolutely do state machines in Bolt, but it's basically visual scripting, so you can do all the other programming things in there as well. And so, should you use Bolt instead of an animator controller to do your state machine? I would encourage you to not do that. And the reason is the animator is so limited in what you can do. It forces you to think of the problem in a very specific way, in a very specific pattern where you have to separate inputs, state machine logic, and outputs. If you do it in code, everything in code, you lose that separation. If you do everything in Bolt in visual scripting, again, you lose the separation because Bolt is too powerful, right? And as soon as you lose that separation, you lose most of the benefits of it. That's why I like to do it like this. I really like restricting myself and the tools that I'm using, because it forces me to think about the solution in a very specific kind of pattern, in a very specific kind of way. And it often makes my thinking much clearer. And if I happen to run into a problem that cannot be solved with this particular pattern, it will be very, very obvious to see that it cannot be solved with this particular pattern, right? And then yes, okay, then I have to do something else. And maybe I have to use Bolt or code or something, but at least I know why. Whereas when you start with like a one size fits all solution like code, you can come up with all kinds of patterns and all kinds of ways to shoot yourself in the foot.
When you're articulating something like this to discuss with a designer or the programmer or something, is there some sort of format which is before it's in Unity's animator layout? Do you write this sort of thing as a doc? Do you throw arrows in a PowerPoint file? Is there some sort of intermediary you use when you're communicating these kind of state machines for sake of, is this what we're going for? Am I missing something here? Kind of things.
We're not actually doing that because we're a remote team. Everyone is sitting in their own little home office and in some corner of the world, and most of us are not in the same time zones as the people we collaborate with, meaning that necessarily there's very little communication between the parties involved, right? So we try to separate our problems that we're trying to solve such that one person has the entire problem and just like sits down and fixes it, and doesn't have to, not like the problem is all over the people, right? So we try to structure our processes in a way that if I'm the one doing the state machine, I don't actually have to explain it to anyone else. I just have to like, do it to myself, figure it out, and I just use a piece of paper, right? Because I don't actually have to upload it or share it or anything. I just grab a pencil and use a piece of paper. And then very, very quickly, I probably end up playing with the real thing in Unity because I can just like do it live, right? And I can see, oh no, I forgot about this on ground still holding jump state or something like that.
We're also very distributed across time zone, asynchronous, and so on. So again, it's sort of just reassuring that we're not like, oh, actually, the better practice would be to use UML diagrams or Visio 2007 or whatever to document and articulate and make your case for the spec and architect it. Nah, throw it into Unity Animator, mess with it, find a bug, fix it.
Yeah, it's I was working in traditional industry before, and we did UML diagrams in Visio, and those tools are professional tools that just have terrible UX. There's no good software at all to make UML diagrams like consistently beautiful looking, quick, without too much overhead, in a way that you can like easily refactor parts of it without having to like manually rearrange entire diagrams. It's we haven't made any progress in the last like 25 years on those kind of software, and we're at the point now where it's literally easier to just do it in Unity than to boot up a multi-$1,000 professional software to kind of draw a state machine.
I couldn't tell if that had been lost to time and people stopped talking about it, or if I just like ducked out of companies big enough to have those discussions. So curious to hear that's exactly where I left it.
Yeah, it's very corporate, and it's really one thing that shows the strength of Unity. The editor itself and the extensibility of the editor is really, really good. And if it's not already in there, in this case, luckily it's already in there, and it has visual debugging and it's beautiful and like super, super good UX. There's probably a chance you can code it up yourself, right? You can extend the inspector and all kinds of things. Yeah, Unity is getting to the point where the user experience of the editor is better than lots of professional tools for like UML diagrams. State of the industry.
Because I know it was a common theme we had like for the podcast episode is like technical interview stuff. And this feels like the kind of thing where it might show a difference as to you throw someone a problem. Do they do a big pile of if else's, or do they do a state machine diagram? And you driving the animator like, this person knows what they're doing. I'm curious, are there some specific blunders that you might see someone do in the animator trying to do it with the state machine, but really going about it like they missed the point of how this is supposed to be done over here or why?
I see a lot of people missing points, but not usually with the animator because, well, I only hire programmers, right? Because I'm a programmer. I don't know anything about art. And when we hire programmers, so what we don't do is like whiteboard coding. That's just a bad idea because this is what I'm using. This is what we're like. There's autocomplete. There's syntax highlighting. I can jump between I can open like the Unity documentation. None of what I can do in a whiteboard, right? So whiteboard coding interviews are basically a red flag to me when applying to jobs or something, because they are just so unrealistic. They just miss the point of what the job is actually going to be like. What we do instead is we come up with a little problem. Say, okay, implement a platformer game with where you can do a short jump, a long jump, a double jump, and coyote time, and come back to me tomorrow, right? And show me the code. And then we just let them go off and do the thing. And they can use the entire internet. They can, I don't know, download the solution from the internet if they want to.
Go to Jonas's GitHub, find the state solution.
Exactly. But the thing is, next day when they come back with the solution, I'm going to ask questions, right? I'm going to do a code review. I'm going to poke around. I'm going to be like, why did you choose this and not that? I'm gonna try to like QA the thing, find some subtle bugs where I didn't think about, like, okay, walking off the ledge and then jumping in the air or what, right? So I we as a company we found that to be way more realistic, and it weeds out programmers really, really fast. They shoot themselves in the foot. And we're pretty much only hiring senior programmers, which have like 5 years or something of AAA or like major ship titles experience. You would be surprised how bad their code is. Very, very often, really, really bad. Was that encouraging, or was that the opposite of encouraging?
It's complicated, but I mean, even the idea that I could answer a programming interview with like not showing you how much code I can write, but by using these things that are actually like not code, because like, hey, this is a smarter way to implement this solution. I can make a case for that. Also reduces how much code I've handed you to critique, and that seems, that seems like an advantage.
I mean, if you come up with because I'm probably going to hand the same test to a lot of people. So I've probably seen a lot of different solutions by now. And if you come up with a new solution that I haven't seen before, and it actually works, I might be impressed, right? And I might be like, I learned something today. So thank you. I'm not sure if that makes me hire you, but that's going to make me like you. If someone came up and implemented this with an animator controller and I didn't think about that before, I would be like, wow, we're immediately gonna introduce that to the team and be like, next time we implement some like complicated logic, let's think about whether we can use this kind of approach, right?
If you're coming into the space and you're trying to implement a solution, even just in a practical case of distributed teams and so on, my other kind of like programmer need for like, oh, other people will look at this. Is there a decent way to drop comments into an animator framework, state machine, etc., or is it like at best you're like sticking a component with an unused public string and, and typing a note on it?
No,
there's not some way to dangle. Here's why I stuck this arrow here.
No.
Note to self: don't let this go below 0.001 because it'll break everything.
No.
Okay.
Nothing
fair enough.
like that.
Thought I'd ask.
Yeah, it's funny, right? There are certain things that are very, very easy in code that are very difficult in other things, and then there are things that are easy in other tools that are difficult in code. One thing I like about the state machine that I cannot do in code is I can visually have this mental model in my head where it's like, okay, it's like a square shape, and the arrows go like meh, 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 in the circle, right? And there's also one diagonal here, and if I ever have to talk to someone, even if I'm not currently at my Unity editor, I would probably be able to scribble something on a whiteboard that looks kind of similar to this, right? Like it's very visual. It's very easy to, literally visualize in your head. Whereas in code, I would have to like ASCII art myself through, or I would have to like, I don't know, use Visio and then export it as a PNG and then drop that into, or SVG and then drop that into the into the project and then put like a link or something in my code being like, look at this file, that's where the documentation is, right? So yes, there are absolutely things that are difficult to do. I wish I could just like drop a little sign in here saying like, okay, careful here, right?
We've got a couple proposals. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on if one of these other you'd be less disappointed or more impressed to see in a code interview. I4 is like, hey, could you just use serialized private description and just have a field you just type in like rationale? Or Brian Nielsen's wondering, was there any harm if you throw a state in there that you never transition to, just use like the title as a signpost?
I mean, what I cannot do is I cannot resize the stage, right? Like I said, it's like,
You can't make a paragraph field out of that.
I can kind of like do this.
Well, and maybe, I mean, maybe it also speaks enough to the fact that you've been doing this for a while and this hasn't come up in a practical scenario. So maybe the reality is you're trying to keep your diagrams self-documenting, clear, obvious enough that like, if you need an explanation of paragraph, maybe you're using states wrong or something, right?
Yeah, that would be a little bit more my argument. You might have noticed that my code has very, very little comments. In fact, no comments at all here. And the reason for that is you have to maintain comments, just like you have to maintain code. If you make changes to code, comments, and you don't make changes to comments, the comments will not be correct anymore. I don't really like comments a lot. And I've been programming for like 20 years. So and I've gone through the usual progression of I know what I'm doing. I'm so smart, right? And no comments. And then oh no, I put myself in a big mess, and this is unmaintainable. I have no idea what my code is doing. So then you overreact and you like okay comment everything and like doxygen like do this and like your code is like 1,000 lines, but 500 of them or 600 of them are like these really trivial
Classic Java docs kind of stuff.
Java docs commons things.
Yeah.
They provide no value whatsoever. In fact, I would argue that they provide negative value because you have to maintain them. What I like to do is I like to break my code down into very, very small functions that do one thing and one thing only, right? And then I name that function the thing that it does, and that's all. And like if you want to know what it does, well, it's in the name. And same with the variables. Like it should all come or the what is going on should come from the names of the classes, the functions, the variables. That's what I found is the most useful. The why is the thing that you want to document. Like why am I doing it this way? And I have not documented the why here. I should absolutely do that either in code or like externally somewhere. I should write down why did I choose to use a state machine? Why did I choose to separate it into these three components: the input, the state machine, the output? Why did I choose exactly these two parameters and not some other encoding of this? Like why did I choose to put 001 in here instead of 0? Right? Those kind of things make for excellent comments. They don't necessarily make for excellent comments in the middle of the code.
I also don't know how much of it is, and it sounds like, again, like, you say 6 programmers, and obviously y'all are much bigger scale and more full-time than anybody in our group. But at the same time, we are small enough teams that part of our answer to documentation is like, ask Tim. You can still reach him. He's right there to have that conversation in a way that's tougher if it's like IBM with hundreds of people on a 7-year project and like no one knows how to reach Derek anymore or whatever.
Yeah, we definitely have the IBM problem where like I said, I think we started 7 years ago on Subnautica and we're still actively developing it, right? Actively bringing it to other platforms. And Steve is just not there anymore, right?
Right.
And so that is a problem. That definitely is a problem. And the other problem is that we're across all time zones in the world. And so someone's always sleeping. And if that's the person you want to ask something, tough luck. And so if you're like scrambling to ship a hotfix for that release that you just put out, and there's like you just cannot wait another 8 hours or something for someone to wake up. In general, we tend to try to make it so that people own certain parts of the system, and so this guy is the UI guy, right? And this guy does all the all the exosuit we have in the game. And if there's a problem with that system, we tend to go to that person first. But in general, we do require any programmer to be able to fix any other programmer's things if need be, right? And so it's a good idea to write code that is easy to understand. Understanding code is way harder than writing code. So if you're already as smart as you can writing the code, and you're feeling particularly smart about this clever way to figure it out, there's a very, very good chance that nobody else in your company will understand it, and also future you will not understand it when you come back in like 6 months.
So Rock's just wondering if, you mentioned you might have to copy states in some situations, and even like just kind of a sketch level of no need to actually wire everything up. Kind of curious to see, okay, if you're doing that, do you literally like box select, copy paste? Do you have some sort of personal naming convention you use to distinguish copy 1 from copy 2, or to try to keep them in sync somehow? Because obviously I'm also having these kind of like little micro, I wish I could prefab this kind of things in my head that I'm sure are not how this works when you're copying state chunks.
It will come up in this very project. So let's go make some more progress here. One thing I actually need another two transitions, which are not super important. They just fix some minor bugs, but this still looks relatively simple to what we had before. The copy paste comes in 2 steps. The next thing we want to implement is coyote time. Coyote time means I'm like trying to hit the edge of the platform here and then jump, right? But like if I'm not like super precise, I might be like just off the ledge, like by a little pixel thing, right? And it's gonna feel like really bad if I then press jump and it's not jumping, and I'm gonna get mad at the game. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna allow the player to jump after they already left the platform um, because the player hasn't noticed yet that they are already off the platform, and so physics are not allowed to make you fall down yet, right? A very common theme in Roadrunner, where the coyote does not fall down until he notices that he's not on the ground anymore. And in order to do that, do we still have time to like really do the workshop here, or should
I think totally. So yeah, certainly as long as you're still up for it. And granted, it's like 6:20 p.m. here. Other folks too, if it's ultra late where somebody else is, obviously welcome to catch us by video. Anybody else who wants to stick around though, by all means, as long as you've still got bandwidth, energy, happy to keep going. I think still very much appreciating it.
Okay, so in that case, I'm going to ask you to think about it. One hint is we can implement coyote time without adding any code. Okay, so you have to implement coyote time in this state machine that is already working for most of our things, and you want to add coyote time in here. You want to be able to still jump for a very short time after you run over the edge of the platform. Any ideas?
I have ideas. Curious if anybody else is. Check for jump after falling state for 1 second is iForce guess. Exit time on ground is Rock's suspicion. Brian B's a delay before switching states.
Exit time on ground. I like that a lot. I'm not sure if that actually works. Let's try it. Because this already has a condition. What happens if it also has an exit time? Set it to half a second, which is way too long, right? In reality, we only want it for like a small fraction of a second, but it's easier to see what's going on if it's half a second. So I set an exit time half a second. It's not actually falling down, which is good. Let's go up here and like fall down. Didn't actually go to falling. Okay, I'm gonna run off the entire game and see. Okay, it is falling. This might actually work. This might be a better solution than what I had. Let's see. Very short jump. Okay, still working. Very long jump. Still working. There's our air jump, which is not an air jump. It is a coyote time jump. So I'm off the platform and I can still jump, right, for half a second, which is, like I said, way too long. It's just for demonstration purposes. We're going to make it shorter. But if it's longer than half a second, so let me fall down from, okay, I'm going to jump as I pass like this platform, which should be more than half a second. Oh, I guess I hit it. Okay, I'm going to reduce this to 100 milliseconds. That's my jump. Still jumping. Doesn't feel right. Oh, okay, that worked. Let me make it even shorter. 10 milliseconds. Okay, no air jump there. Oh, yeah. I think this works. This is great. You just came up with a solution that is better than mine.
Well, but my only qualm, and this kind of builds on our previous discussion about like, hey, this feels way less noticeable to me in a state diagram than a solution of somehow adding another state in there or something else of like, especially when there's an a literal epsilon value we threw somewhere else of 0.001 to treat it as 0. The idea that there's a meaningful 0.01 buried in one of these state transitions, I would want somehow to call attention to, like, there's a specific meaningful value buried in this nest, right?
Right. You know what? It actually isn't working. I just noticed what's going on. Okay, this Unity. Okay, so see this blue bar here? It cycles through once per second. When it hits the end, that's when it's actually gonna do things for these transitions here. So even though I set the exit time very, very short, so let me, like, this short basically means nothing, right? It's essentially like it's not there, but you can still see I'm still allowed to jump. So what's going on here? It doesn't actually work. It only works if, like, right as I wait, let me wait for this to, like, be very close to the end as I run off the platform. Okay, then it works. So no, this was a very good idea, but unfortunately no, it's not it, because this Unity is very confused what to do with transitions that have both an exit time and a condition. And Chris's remark was also right, that you can't really see it. You have to click all the transitions, and I guess you have to click all the transitions anyway to look at the conditions. I would like it more if the conditions were, like, somehow displayed. It's not a thing, but at least you can see the shape. So let's keep the same idea, but make it a little bit more explicit.
Maybe this is Misha's guess here of you adding a state between on ground and falling. As, like,
that's exactly what I'm doing. Yeah.
Nice.
So I'm breaking up this one, right, which is what we try to do with the exit time, and it's what happened.
So you right clicked on one and chose make transition, which I don't know if it zoomed inside of it or something. Is it very unhappy because the game's in play somehow? I don't know if snapping out of that will.
Did I delete everything?
Oh, we've got an error at the bottom. Something's. It's actually really hard to read on my screen. This little red text in the very bottom.
Yeah, there's a null reference exception. I think I broke Unity.
Have we tried to go one step too far while the game's in play? Because I'm still surprised it let us get that far. Ah, look at
that. So apparently I was painting a transition. Okay. I guess it's not 100%. Oh, you didn't see that. Okay, so we broke up this transition. We're still gonna say no exit time, no transition time, on ground false, right? And then kind of like immediately go to falling. This should literally be the same as what we had before, just with an intermediate state, which you can't even see because it's, like, immediate. It transitions so fast across the coyote time. Let's make it not transition so fast.
Well, and also you could actually, because we're in Unity, you could also just go to your project settings for timescale, stretch everything to be slow-mo, and still properly debug, right? Like, because it'll keep all this in sync with your scripts and everything else. Probably.
Can I do that at runtime?
I think so. If it's, edit project settings-y stuff, and then there's the time fields.
Put that in here. Time scale.
Yeah.
Okay, 10 times slower. Okay, this moves 10 times slower. That's nice.
So yeah, I don't know if this lets us kind of easier get in there on recreating scenarios of pushing after a certain state's changed or watching when they're switching.
That's a good idea. I like it. Okay, I'm going to keep that. I like that I'm learning more than you are. Okay, coyote time, exit time, half a second, just so that we can see stuff. And then while we are in coyote time, which we are as soon as on ground is false, we're still going to allow a jump, right? That's the magic arrow here. That's the one that allows us to jump despite not technically being on ground anymore. let's see it. I fall off, coyote time, here's the jump. Fall off, coyote time, oh, that was too long. Coyote time, half a second was over, no jump anymore. Done. That's all we want. And the magic, the delay is in here. 0. Let's say 10, a tenth of a second. So like fall off the platform. This like if you're really like visually very, very close to the platform, you can absolutely always jump it, no matter whether you perfectly timed it or whether coyote time helped you a little bit. But it is almost unnoticeable. Off the platform jump.
Well, I think, and this is also a thing I think we've seen, and maybe not actually even in Unity, but it'd be even easier to hook up in Unity than we've done in JavaScript and stuff, where if we just throw some other script on that recolors our player or something based on the state that they're in, it becomes so much easier to visually debug, like, am I in coyote time? Should I be able to double jump, etc.
Right. I could totally put here an on enter in there, like in coyote time, right? And then I could have a colorization of my player happening when we are in coyote time, and then I would reset the coyote time on falling and on start jump.
And I think it's the case from how it's wired together. But just to double check, this speaking of double jump, this doesn't actually, as set up, allow you to do a short hop and then double jump off of your I've been off the ground for less than a fifth of a second kind of thing, does it? Because it's,
well,
I guess it'd be bailing.
It does. I mean, okay. Let me make this really slow. It does do that. Okay, so this is my very short jump, right? And as you can see, it was in coyote time for a very brief amount of time. And so if I manage to release and press the button again within that time, okay, here it goes again. I'm going to press the button, immediately release. I'm going to be in coyote time. There's coyote time. And if I had pressed the button again while in there, yes, there would have been, I could have done like a double jump.
We'd get like an additional foot or whatever on the vertical, whatever.
Yeah.
Any simple way to tie it so it only applies if we step off or if a ground vanishes underneath us or something?
I think what we can do is we can say jump button is false, right? So this is really, does it still work?
Or I guess if jump button true took us out of coyote time, or if jump button, what would the state be? I guess if jump button false took us out of coyote time? No, that doesn't work either.
Jump button, the thing I was curious about is, oh yeah, that still works. Okay, right. I'm holding this. Okay, yeah. Okay, this actually works because I cannot reach the on ground state while the jump button is being pressed, because the only way to go into it is from here, right? And so it happens to actually work, where if I walk off a platform while still holding jump, I will not be in this ground state. So if I am on ground and I press the jump button, because now two things happen at the same time, right? At the same time, the jump button is going to become true. No, that's not true. The jump button will become true first, and then we're going to start a jump in one frame, and then we're going to be already off the ground. I don't know why it went into coyote time.
I don't suppose it's one of these things where like the input update interval may or may not be at render interval, but closer to fixed update or I don't know if these things are somehow out of sync with each other. Because I guess the physics raycast is coming from fixed update from the flag. Apologies to everyone if I'm sort of derailing this. It's just sort of very much the sort of like quagmires I get stuck in as to like.
No, you're absolutely right. This is good stuff, right? And there could be some subtle bug in here, which essentially means, okay, don't use the animator for state machines because it's not actually working. But so what I just saw here is, okay, let me press the jump button for just one frame. It did jump, which means it had to be going through the start jump state, because that's literally the only state where I have any message at all saying start jump, right? But I also saw it go back into the on ground state. And I don't know how it does that, because it shouldn't be able to even do that. Okay. You see that?
Yeah.
It was in the start jump for like a brief second, and then it went back to on ground for a brief second, and then it went to coyote time falling. There's no transition from here back to here. It should not be able to do that, but it totally did. And I don't know why it does that.
Fair enough. Exercise left to the reader. People can experiment offline. Just as I'm gonna feed my cat real fast, but I'll be right back. Feel free to keep going.
Yeah, my best guess is because this is the default state, that somehow that makes a difference. Let's set this as a default state. No, it goes back. Oh, I know what's happening. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay. I'll wait for Chris to come back. But basically, what was happening is when you set the time scale to something like ridiculously slow, your physics still tick at the regular physics time step, I think, or something like that. So when I was what was going on here, Chris, I figured it out. Is I'm releasing the button immediately, right? And it actually does go through the entire circle. And then it still detects that it's on the ground because I'm using a raycast. And the raycast has like a little bit of like, it allows for like this much off the ground. And it says, okay, you're still on the ground, right? So this way I'm already like on my way up, but it detects me as being on the ground. The fix would be to only detect it to be on the ground when I'm, moving down, or at least
collision normal or something, as opposed to the raycast with a bit of margin of error, I guess.
Yeah, something like that, right? And so basically my on ground bool is wrong, and that's why everything is wrong here. If my on ground bool that I'm sending input into the state machine was correct, it wouldn't go immediately back to the on-ground state, and therefore it wouldn't go into coyote time immediately after that, as it rises a little bit higher and on-ground becomes false. And then I wouldn't be able to do the jump in midair because of coyote time, right?
And I want to mention too, for everybody who's maybe not written a platform character controller, two things are like, one is we actually do want that margin of error anyway, because like otherwise like running down ramps and running down stairs gets really problematic if you're trying to base it on physical points of contact. Those are not reliable in many natural environments. And then the other thing is like all collision controllers for platformer character controllers are like kind of slightly a mess. There's always weird edge cases. Eventually the game kind of designs around it, right? Like we do what we can with it, but there's going to be some like, actually it's, if you land and attack at the same time, you can get a second strike in Castlevania, and you design around it.
Yeah, that's correct. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to fix this live. I've never done this before, but we are going to do still close to the ground. We're going to just introduce an intermediate state, and we're going to move these two transitions here, move these down to here, and then go from here to falling. And we're only going to go to falling if on ground is actually false. So we're going to, if I'm too fast and on ground is still like kind of like true, we're not going to do the full cycle. We now have a stopgap in there.
You're going to snip the old connections, right? That used to go to falling from start.
Exactly. The only reason I still have them is because I have to like look what the values were, and then like be like, okay, type this in here. There, the one.
And question, having not spent much time in the animator, since usually I'm doing stuff in code, can you actually just drag that arrow that used to be connecting these two and then use that to connect another one to keep its same properties, or does it not work like that?
I have tried to like shift or like control or
didn't know if there was some known answer. It's fine if the answer is like, side by side them. or also like I can use the gear to copy properties like we do in standard Unity Inspector stuff. I don't know if it lets us for these states.
Transition.
Like in the top right, straight right. Sorry to be kind of backseat navigator. And then below that, the gear under it. Can we click on that gear and copy its properties? No, it won't let us. Fascinating.
Huh. Only reset.
Well, the more we know.
Yeah. No catch, only throw.
Yep.
So I don't know if there's a better way to do this. I'm doing it manually. What was that again? I deleted it too fast. Okay, I think it was like this. Okay, still close to the ground. Actually, no longer on the ground. Actually falling.
And I like that you are able to connect this to when the same flag that was causing us a delay issue, when that Boolean value changes, as opposed to building some sort of like arbitrary guess variable of like, we'll give it a quarter of a second leeway to let it finish its thing. And this is obviously much more, hopefully, precise.
Okay, so let's see if this, move this over here, make it a little bit more beautiful. Programmers.
Isometric angles only.
Exactly. Okay.
You're stuck.
I can only unstuck myself by walking up. Okay, that was not a great idea. Oh well.
Experiment tried. That might be the first step in the direction of exercise left to readers.
Yeah. So the problem was that I released the jump button too fast, right? And then I can never go into falling. Oh well. Yeah. Sorry, exercise left to the readers. But Coyote time. The main thing about Coyote time was pretty simple to get in. All we needed to do was add this middle state and break up this one transition, right? I really like how my workshop is falling apart. How lots
of usable stuff, and also obviously like menu systems won't have this problem. Lots of other ways to use the animator and code won't have this very specific platformers. I mean, like literally, like I think the Celeste released their Unity script that they use for their character controller, and it's just thousands of lines of like if statements because it's a platformer.
Well, so it's the entire game, right? In a platformer game, you essentially have all your game in the character controller. That's the game. All the other stuff is just like little bits and pieces around it. Probably not very difficult. Okay, let's pretend we didn't see this. I mean, this actually works pretty well. The only bug we had was this like weird double jump when we really fast double tap the jump while very close to the ground. Maybe that is acceptable. It's not easy to pull off. I would like to go to the implement actual double jumping, which also answers the problem of copy paste stuff. Shall we have a brainstorm session how to do the double jump? Again, the hint is no code.
So one of my first thoughts, which would involve, I think, a modest amount, a very, very, very small amount of code, would be some sort of variable that's keeping straight whether or not I'm still going upward. Because I feel like to me that's more so than time. Oftentimes the like, I don't know, or like, am I on my way down? I'm allowed to double jump, and otherwise not. But I'm also curious in how we do that and don't lose track of the fact that like you can't do that repeatedly. You can't jetpack around. Rob's wondering about a second start jump.
Second start jump is a good idea, and you were bringing up a good point there. Again, different platformers handle double jump differently. Some of them allow you to only do the double jump while you're still rising on your first jump. Some of them allow you to do the double jump for the entire arc of your jump, so you can like totally like and then you start double jump, right? Some of them are on a timer. All kinds of things. We're gonna keep it very, very simple and say okay, we're not going to limit you. Just if you're in your jump, wherever it is, even if you're going down, going to allow you to jump, right? State between start jump and stop jump that transitions to falling. Between here. This one is really, really fast as soon as I leave the key. I think I have to keep that. Release the key.
Well, I guess because in order for you to do a second jump, it's going to have to be after you release the key, right? Because you have to be able to push the button down again.
That's
so
correct.
You had to have already let go from your previous.
Correct. So I'm probably already in here because I'm like starting the jump, then I have to release the key, which brings me in here, and then I'm like immediately go over to here, and then I kind of like want to copy. Copy, paste. Kind of want to like do a second jump, something like that, right? And then after I'm done with my second jump, I kind of want to go back to falling, but I don't want to like loop around because that would allow me infinite numbers of jump. So let's just like, okay, copy this. Be like, okay, maybe like that. Something like that could probably work. Let's see. Well, we still keep the start jump and stop jump on these. Oh, also have this transition, which I didn't talk about, but it's essentially saying that if I never release the jump button, I still become falling at some point, which is after 1 second. So now this shape down here looks exactly like this shape over here, right? Which could be what we want. And then let's get these ready. Here's my next jump. Jump button true. Jump button false. No condition on this one, just really, really fast. I should have copied all three of them, then I didn't have to type it in.
Well, actually, to my question about copying properties, will the gear in the top right let you do it? The one that's, no, not that one either. Huh. Drats.
Yeah. Not a fan.
Maybe a new editor extension possibility buried in there somewhere. It feels like there's probably some way to do some additional hacky script to let us do something.
It should be a thing. It's not a thing. Okay, these two look the same now. These two look the same. These two look the same. And these two look the same. And these two look the same. I think we're good. I think we have successfully copied this part of the state machine and put it over here.
Rock's curious, can you make a preset with the item left of the gear? Well, let us use that to...
Let's see. See if it does. Let's call this, what's that? Instantaneous
single frame or something.
Transition.
Well, I guess another thing too about the niceness of these state machines and the separation and stuff, right? If you did want to have another variable that poked and checked has the player picked up the jump boots? Does the player, whatever earns them the double jump, you can cut off a whole transition state with just having another bool in there that's peeking at something else relevant in your code.
So the answer to the previous, so the answer to the previous question is yes, I can preset the thing, and then I can copy it over to another transition. But apparently, the target, the destination of the transition, is part of the preset, and now it just rerouted my arrow from here to here to like over there, which is not what I wanted, and I don't know how to.
There seem to be some pros and cons to.
Yeah. I would like to like copy this, not the entire
as
thing,
long as
right?
exactly what you need is the same properties pointing to the same state. You're set.
If I knew how to like rewire it to the other thing,
copy
then maybe...
transition parameters. What is? Huh. can you? Oh yeah, paste settings, paste conditions, paste both.
Condition.
It feels like somewhere in here there's a combination of copying and pasting that just because I'm, as I'm watching you do this, and obviously you've got enough practice at it that you're like, well, I zero this out, I uncheck this in this case, but not that case, and I'm just like, gosh, I wish I could have like 3 lines for myself off to the side, like a palette where I label what are these for, just help me keep straight which is which.
That would be really good. Yeah, maybe if you can't have it to not transition anywhere. I don't know.
Fair enough.
Play around with it, and if you find out how to do that, please let me know. Send me
curious, email. If you minus on the transition, does it just disconnect it, I guess? Oh man, but you lose the whole thing too. Huh.
Good idea though. Yeah. Lots of good ideas. I think.
Question.
Oh no, go for it, John.
Yeah.
Just because like we're messing with these settings here. Just because like before you had tried has exit time true, and then you had exit time at small 0.001. Could there be some weird hitch where like if you have an exit time checked, could it like set like a minimum default latency there, where then like you can't set exit time to 0? Is like, could that be a thing? Or I'm not super familiar with this stuff, so I'm just kind of guessing. But
like a script that throws an error if it fails that sort of test, if like these two things don't line up or something like that.
Yeah, or like in JavaScript when you have like a interval timer, like even even if you set it to be 0, there's always some delay. Where here, since like has exit time is checked, and then exit time is not like or is 0, then it's kind of, I guess in my mind it's kind of contradicting, but maybe I'm just misunderstanding.
No, I agree. I think it is contradicting, and I would love it to either, if it has an exit time in 0, just like immediately transition, or not allow me to do that. Like it doesn't actually allow me to put in negative values, which is good, right? But it allows me to put in 0, and then it doesn't work, and that's not particularly nice. So I'm actually going to report that as a bug to Unity and be like, hey, what's this supposed to do, right? Because it doesn't seem to do what I think it does, or what it should do.
And speaking of which, maybe this my other reflex, and I can't tell if this is like there be dragons, this drag this back precisely to the problem we're trying to avoid. My other code curiosity is like, okay, well, I could pretty easily write a code validator that checks to see is this flag checked and is this value not 0, and then throw an error in the console, etc. But does code actually have a way in Unity to like span this web, iterate over everything in it, do some validation, or is it like, nah, my code actually cannot or should not peek at this?
I haven't tried.
Fair enough.
I'm pretty sure that there needs to be some way to peek at this, because where is it? What's it called? Oh, it's the game dev workshop, right? Why is it not here? I have lost my way. Okay, anyway. There should be a way to do it with code, because Unity is able to display it to you. And most of what you see in the Unity editor is actually C# script, not C++. So there's a good chance that whatever they do, it might be hidden behind like internal, and you can't access without reflection and those kind of things. But if we're talking about unit tests, using reflection is totally fine, right? You just like dig your way in and rummage through the internals there and like iterate over the transitions. My gut feeling tells me like 80-90% should be possible. I would expect it to be a little bit more difficult than like straightforward, because probably not exposed these kind of like very, very deep down editor internals. You don't need any of this at runtime. You're probably not going to manipulate a state machine using code at edit time. So I would expect these things to be internal. But that should be doable. And yes, that would be a very good idea. If you have this kind of, if you use this kind of like framework, if you do animators as state machines, you probably want to check in code through your entire project, just run over all the animator controllers you find in your assets, and go into them and crawl all the transitions and check that it's never checked and 0 at the same time. Any other combination is fine, but not this combination, right? And at the same time, I'll bug Unity about it, and maybe hopefully they'll fix it, and we don't have to worry about these kind of quirks anymore. But this workshop has been very realistic in the way that 90% of game dev time is quirks. the thing that we're trying to do is fairly straightforward to communicate within 10 minutes, but we're already spending 2 hours, because there are just so many quirks we have to deal with, right?
Speaking of which, does double jump work? That was as we were discussing 15 minutes ago. I'm curious as to
jump. Was that Coyote time? I
think one of those was. It's a little tricky
really short. Let me make this basically ridiculously short so that it's disabled. Run off here. Oh, so this is now a double jump, not a Coyote time jump. Okay, jump. Jump, jump. No triple jump. Jump, triple jump. No. Run off, jump. Yes, double jump. Run off, jump. No triple jump. Seems to work. Seems pretty good.
Nice.
Woo!
And again, it's just nice how easily you could attach particle puffs or something to the air jump, because it's connected to this very particular state transition in this tree, or sound for it, or whatever.
Right. One thing that I can't find the bug right now, but my final animator state machine looks a little bit different. There's an intermediate state in here, falling, still holding, jump for some reason, which I don't remember anymore, so that we don't do the second jump. A few more here, but you will absolutely find the difference between what we just did and the state machine by simply playing the game with your state machine and looking at what's going on, right? And then be like, oh yeah, I forgot if I run off here and then still hold the button, and then there's a double jump. I think I just found it. Okay, I'm holding the jump button. I'm still holding the jump button. Did you see? There's a double jump now, but I didn't actually press it twice. I'm just holding it, because this transition here times out after 1 second, and then I'm falling, and I'm still holding the jump button, so it immediately goes into the double jump. That's the bug I had to fix by introducing an intermediate state here, saying, okay, falling, but I'm still holding the jump button, because there's this one weird transition that allows me to do that. Yeah, I think that concludes what I have.
Nice. One other thing I want to stick in there is it's just nice to see that obviously there's kind of a layer of a separation, which part of this is forcing the thinking of a layer of separation between the actions driving or functions being called for the player and the stuff happening in a way that it's pretty easy to picture coding some automatic playing tests to show character runs off edge, character Coyote times within the margin of error, to double check, okay, I made changes to my diagram. Does one of these not do what it's supposed to do, without having to each time was that 150 milliseconds or not? Did I cheat this somehow? What happens if I hold it? Just seemed like kind of a nice pre-programmable checker. So if you throw in some new functionality, you're not breaking something else you're counting on.
That's a really interesting idea. I'm not sure if you can just instantiate animator controllers and drive them through code instead of playing the game. Maybe there's an internal function to update with a delta time an animation controller, so you could do this entire thing in a unit test, because the animation controller that we wrote is just data, right? It just It sits here. It's just data. There's nothing preventing us from accessing that data and messing with it at edit mode. It would be really nice to have a unit test that kind of grabs an animator, drives it with a fake time, right? And says, okay, Now half a second has passed, the animation controller. What state are you in now? I know for a fact that you can programmatically access what state are you in now. That doesn't even require reflection. I had to do that in Subnautica at some point. For save load, I had to save load animation, the state that the state machine is in, right? And then you quit the game and then come back in, and then I kind of like helicopter the state back into where it was. So that's definitely a thing. So there might be a way to also drive an animation controller in code. Be like, okay, mock up the time provider.
Well, and there's another question is because when these things do start to overlap the animations, and this is where when I have worked with somebody who was using more animator stuff because they were an actual animator, there were all kinds of other transitions where there's blending and such built into that in a way that does not sound like it plays nice with my programmatic, like I need this on a single frame transition. Is there any either tips on, obviously at some point you've probably do something like this that probably did intersect animations or sounds or something, getting this to play nice, or has that become like just a separate state machine to drive
right
translations and stuff?
So you might have noticed that I set the transition duration to 0 on all my transitions. And the reason for that is if you have anything else than 0 in there, what Unity actually does is will immediately enter the next transition, the next state, but then it will exit the old one later. So you will, if you have these two states, for example, here on enter start jump, on enter stop jump, if I had an on exit here, which was whatever it is, just like put some message in there, and I had a transition time here, I would get stop jump first, and then I would get, okay, and now I'm also exiting this. And like that's just not how state machines work in for a programmer, right? That's a weird thing. You always want to exit first and then enter something else. And that's why for all intents and purposes, I'm setting the duration to 0. If this was an actual state machine an actual animation controller driving an actual animation, there's a very good chance that there's a lot of blending in there. And what you do in that case is you introduce dummy states. So probably something like you blend between these two, and you want to do something on enter here, so you're not actually doing on enter that one, but you're like instant transition to this one, and then you replace that, right? And so now you can have, and this is now the like stop jump for programmers, right? And this is where you put your script in, and you don't put it in here because this is like blending. And then you still get your nice little message exactly at the right time by introducing these instantaneous fake states. And you plead to your animators that they don't kill you.
But yeah, I mean, this is one of these things that like often when these dialogues do come, but it's a design struggle too, is to, do we let the action start if the animation's still finishing? And, the game designer wants the bullets to start leaving immediately, and the animator wants you to like finish the ladder climb before you can start the reload. And it's a haggle, but just kind of curious as to, that's neat to add that additional state where there's the transition for the animator in the same framework, which obviously you don't want to totally decouple them either, of risking that the animation state is somehow completely off the rails from the programmer state.
Yeah. So I think you would end up with like two types of states in your state machine. One is for the animator, and one is for the programmer, right? And you probably have to throw in a couple of intermediate states with just instant transitions so that both these worlds are satisfied. I wish there was a way to just make it very much easier. I wish there was a way to attach a script to a transition and not just to a state, right? So like when the transition is being used, that's when I want to send a message to my game object. Fortunately, there's not such a thing, so that would make things easier. But we make do with these like fake states, right? That are just like there for a single frame and act as hey, I'm just in this transition right now.
I don't know if probably leaving out because it's like, well, didn't need to for today, but also curious as to, some of these just feel conceptually different as to you kind of do from looking at it, like, oh, that's a one frame versus like this one is a continuous. I don't know if you've in your own practice or otherwise some sort of naming convention of how you mark those to stand out. I put these in parentheses, I underscore it, or if it's just like more of a matter of familiarity working in kind of your own ecosystem.
I think you're right. It's if you actually use this, you will probably come up with some convention that works for you, right? And you've already noticed I can put all kinds of like characters in here. So maybe if this is a fake state, I put it in like scary brackets because animators don't know how to handle those, right? And that's how I know, okay, this is like an intermediate state, or maybe I put like an arrow or something to indicate this is really just like an arrow thingy. I don't know. You come up with something that works for you. I wish there was a way to color these. I would really like to make these like blue and these green or something. But
yeah, that was my other thinking. I'm curious because obviously Unity's editor has lots of extensibility script support, but I don't know how much it overlaps into the Animator framework, or if that's kind of a little bit sandboxed from us messing with it in the same way.
Yeah, I haven't tried it, but I wouldn't expect this to be easy. I would expect this window here to be very, very custom because it uses all kinds of things that were not even a thing previously exposed. Like if you try to write editor tools, you now can use like UI elements, the new UI framework, and that actually does have lines and splines and squiggly things. And so maybe they are now rebuilding this entire thing in UI elements. But before that, this was all like a very custom solution and probably not exposed to you without big headaches.
Right on. If anybody else has questions, certainly we can still maybe do a question or two. And again, I don't want to keep us going too long. We've been lots of time, which is super appreciated. If no one else does, I've got sort of another, I think, generic, back to this kind of core question of there's this reusable concept that applies to lots of things in the high level, and you've got a GitHub thing that provides additional details. We'll link to in the description and wherever else people find this video. Having watched this, I'm about to jump feet first into using this for menus or for AI. The other two use cases you mentioned. Like, oh, by the way, if you're going to do that, asterisks, here's a little note about how you do that differently, or is it like, nah, it's pretty directly this, but less messy because it's not a player controller?
Yeah, I think it's pretty directly this.
Good.
AI should be exactly this, because you will also have like these instantaneous transitions all the time, just to send messages on a transition instead of on a state. Menu state machines probably don't need any instant stuff, only the button presses, right? And you might not use booleans, but you might use triggers depending on what is easier. But the shape of the solution will always be the same. It will always consist of some inputs coming in, a state machine doing the logic, and then send message to talk back to your game objects.
And the AI, right, and correct me if I'm mistaken, I'm assuming is the sort of level of AI which it's like alert, angry, reloading, retreating, that kind of level of AI, right? As opposed to, I mean, AI also aims or path finds, or like, no, those are code problems. This is
yeah, right. Not path finding. You're right. More like what's it called? Yeah, I don't actually know. But yeah, the decision making AI, right? Like should I now throw a grenade at the player, or should I go plant a bomb? That kind of AI. Am I being shot at and therefore should seek cover, or is a person who's shooting at me at very low health and therefore I should just like try to shoot them and not run into cover? That kind of like behavioral AI, as opposed to I guess pathfinding used to be called AI at some point. So the funny thing about AI is it's everything in computer science which is not computer science, which is not like accepted as a curriculum in computer science. So at some point things like state machines and fuzzy logic and pathfinding were AI. And now they are just not anymore. They are just like pathfinding, right? When we now have a name for it. And so the field of AI shrinks.
GDC summer had an AI roundtable, and one of the first points made is like AI, like you can take an AI class now and it's like writing spam detection, machine learning, that's AI. But like often for games, like there's like getting your bad guy to walk back and forth and fall off platforms is like what we would call AI, or like Pac-Man AI, but it's obviously no academic is writing a thesis on that.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
And there's a very good chance that your washing machine has AI in there, right? Because they are using fuzzy logic or something like that.
Preloading cleaning fluid at a certain time of day based on usage patterns and what I've been Googling or whatever.
Yeah. Means different things to different people. What I mean in this case is bots, right? Bots playing the game, making decisions.
Nice. And in-game washing machines. If number two, I guess is in closing, if you want to direct people to one last, maybe pull it up on your screen too, the GitHub page where obviously they can find this, which has also got, I think, your Twitter handle baked right into the URL anywho, and we'll put that link elsewhere, but just so people get a sense of like, hey, there's more here, dig into this, download these things, look at this stuff.
The easiest way to find me is to Google Jonas Subnautica, because literally everything you find is me.
And there's a down.
That's a good thing of having a name that is not very common. This is my Twitter, @CodeLumpen. How do I go to my own Twitter? Okay. and my GitHub is github.com/lumpen, right? LUMPN. That wasn't available for Twitter anymore, so it's CodeLumpen.
Rock on. And I want to reiterate too, for folks that are here in our group with Home Team or Cash's Video Leader and Home Team, like Jonas is available as our like advanced Unity trainer, who if you're leading a Unity project, and if you're not, you totally can any moment start leading a Unity project, and then Jonas can meet with you after once a quarter to like help talk about some particular thing you're doing, how to implement for this thing, give kind of some bit of code review feedback on like, okay, well I see what you're going for, here's how I might have done that. But so by all means, part of why we're doing this too is we want to remind folks like, Jonas is here. Please make use of Jonas. We want you to. He wants to talk about these problems more in your exact context of your projects. And I'm excited that thank you so much for doing this workshop, because I think it's been super valuable. And again, I'm kind of like bracing myself for office hours when people who are attending this, watching this video, are going to have questions for me. And I'll be like, I'm figuring it out too, but I bet we need to uncheck the box or set this to 001. And then...
Well, thank you so much for having me. That was a lot of fun. And yes, absolutely. If you have any Unity questions, feel free to reach out. I'm always interested to hear those. And there's a fair chance that I might have heard about something very similar that someone else had the same problem. And hopefully, I will remember what we did to address it.
If folks are comfortable unmuting to clap just for our like closeout, it'll give me real audio of clapping for the recording.
Thanks, guys.
Nice. There we go. Excellent. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day, night, morning. For those of you who stayed up until it's like 3 a.m. where you're at or whatever, thanks for that. We'll see you all around 4 a.m. where I4s is. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thanks, Jonas.